For
I'm
sure.
Jasana from Positively Parenting and the 30-Day Theta Challenge. And I have my friend Allie with me, who is a parenting expert. And she is a retired teenager, as she calls herself. And we are going to, yes, we are all retired teenagers. And we're going to talk about boundaries and consequences. So Allie, just, to maybe you can elaborate a little bit on yourself. And
For sure, for sure. Well, thanks for having me here. I think this 30-day challenge you're doing is really, really cool, particularly with everything going on in the world, let alone in what is normally a stressful time, and depending on where you live in the world, is now maybe stressful because you can't do any of the normal things. So it's really great to bring such intention and consciousness to being how our brain is responding to stress and how that impacts our body. So love that. So I come from a very loving home, and yet my parents and I were like night and day so different. And so for me, it felt actually really traumatic and painful, not feeling loved and being so full of anger. And I knew what was going on was wrong for me, but I didn't know how to say it. And so instead, I just was like really sassy and pissy, and not very fun to parent. And by 12, I was dealing with some unhealthy food issues that became eating disorders at 15. I started drinking by the time I was 13. And at 17, I attempted suicide. And I spent the next 10 years of my life really fiercely seeking healing for myself, and then thinking, oh, I got this. I'm gonna be the most amazing parent, and I'm just gonna love them, and they're gonna be compliant and so good. And then I got into being a parent. It was like, holy crap, this is so hard. I had to do a little bit more work than just that, but these negative patterns kept showing up for me. And so in my life coach training certification and my relationship coach certification was when I actually learned, oh my gosh, this is how dysfunctional negative patterns are set up. And this is how to untangle and heal from them. And only by doing that myself and then becoming more of the parent that I knew was possible, certainly not perfect.
That's right.
And that was when I knew I had to share this with other parents, because I think growing up in a family, emotional pain happens. We're all imperfect and poking at each other, but trauma, stress, and repeating negative patterns is not actually necessary. I stand for that. That's not necessary. And when we know the difference and we know how, because nobody's teaching it, this is not about anybody's intelligence, then we can start undoing it. So that's my thing. That's my jam.
Yes, noticing it in ourselves. And that's what the 30-Day Theta was all about. That's why I decided to come up with this challenge, is because, I noticed that a lot of parents are feeling like burnout right now. And like, we don't always know like why we're feeling or reacting in certain ways. Right. And it really does start with like doing our own internal work on like, what are the thoughts that are going on in our minds that are making us feel this way or react this way, or interact with our children in this way. And I just feel like the place to start, because I of course we can teach a lot of strategies and things like that, but if you can't even recognize, like like you said, I've been on this journey too of like working on myself, and that's how I noticed it as well, is that there's all these expectations in the world, and society is set up to make us feel like we're failing. Our brains are actually kind of set up to make us feel like we're failing, because we're wired to like fix things. So we're constantly looking for problems. And so we have to intentionally like set to where we're looking for, good in our lives, and also stopping and realizing how we're interacting with other people and how that's affecting them, like our children.
Yeah. And knowing that we are at choice. Because that was something that, okay, as shocking this is, I was probably 3 years into being a life coach, and I was teaching people about choice, and I did not understand choice in my own life. And I think it's funny now, like painful funny, but I think it's funny now that I didn't realize that the way I was doing life in certain areas that felt disjointed and painful, that I had a choice to change the pattern, even if I didn't quite see it yet, that I had the choice, so that then it's like I gave myself permission in that choice to say, okay, let's build an awareness. Let's see it, not from a place, because our ego never wants to feel wrong, right? Or have to change. That's very threatening for our ego. And I'm not saying you are watching our egotistical. We all have an ego.
Yeah.
And so it was a way that I had to kind of disarm that, to be able to see the negative pattern, to then actually let myself choose to change, to do a different behavior, to say to someone else, like, you know what, I don't like that anymore. I've decided that doesn't work for me. And not just also other people, but start to look here. So yeah, the choices, it's so powerful, so powerful.
I love that. And that kind of like segues into what we're talking about, which is like setting boundaries, and like setting boundaries for yourself, you know, is the first step, right? And you're setting boundaries for your kids. I mean, you know, we've been setting boundaries for our kids the whole time when our kids were small up until teenagers. And it kind of does shift a little bit in the teen years, right?
It definitely does. It definitely does. So first of all, let's define a boundary, right? A boundary is a definition of what works and what doesn't for each person. So a boundary for me may not be a boundary for you.
Yep.
And that is where relationships get a little bit messy, is in the negotiation of, how do I have what works for me and less of what doesn't work for me, and you have what works for you. And so there's a negotiation in there, and it definitely changes in the teen years. And I think because we're not taught this stuff, this is where parents get tripped up, is that when kids are sort of 0 to 8, it's a more transactional style of parenting. It's a more command and control. I'm not saying you don't love them. I'm just saying, generally, when you make a request, your child might have a short emotional outburst or something, but then they do it. Like, I say this, you do this. It's a little more transactional. And because their emotional brain is underdeveloped, so they have happy, mad, glad, sad. That's kind of it. They have simplistic emotional complexity that doesn't get in the way as much. And then all of a sudden they have a pituitary gland explosion in their brain. And now all of a sudden they literally have a new brain. They literally have a new brain that is developing wildly more complex feelings, which, because they don't know they aren't their feelings, become their lens, which filter through messy, their thoughts and their behaviors become different. And so my way of setting boundaries with them, which used to feel like kind of black, white, I say this, you do this. No, it looks more like this path that goes like this, and then may or may not get to the end, because I'm not dealing with the same person. And as a parent, when I can get to the honest place of letting go of the child I used to know, is not the teenager standing in front of me. And there's a grieving part of that. So I honor that. There's a grieving part of that, but there's a whole new learning to what setting a boundary looks like with someone who literally has a new brain and has no idea how to use it.
Yeah, you brought up so many things. The first thing that I thought of was, you know, children's brains are actually operating in theta most of the time.
Yes.
When they're up until about 7 years old. They're in alpha. Alpha's a little faster than theta, but they're operating this slower brain pace where, you know, they're making connections. They're, you know, they say, you know, show me a child of 7 and show me the man, right? So you're programming in that time. So there's a whole lot of programming. It's like 95% of the subconscious programs that we're going to run throughout our lives are set in that time. And that's, you know, things like, it's not the big complex stuff, right? Like the emotions and stuff. It's like, you know, and yes, they've learned about all that stuff, and now they're going to process it after, like you said. So, and then they're, you know, strengthening their neural pathways actually after 7, like in the teen years actually is when they really start to slough off things that they're not using in the brain, like pathways and programs that are not, you know, serving them anymore. They're not using, and strengthening what they are using. And that's why it's like such a prime time to, you know, help them, you know, process emotions, you know, and learn about boundaries and setting them for themselves, right? So like we can only teach them if we know about them, right? About
Right.
setting boundaries for ourselves. And I love how you said it's each boundary is for, you know, each person. You're setting your own boundary. And I was, because I was just talking to my husband about this the other night. He's like, I was talking to the neighbor, and you know, the neighbor, and she kept talking to other people, and I said, well, you have a choice, right, to continue that conversation, or to decide that, you know, like when you're getting interrupted all the time, that you don't, you know, these are your choices, and then that's going to cause another consequence, right? Like, so
Yeah.
our actions cause, you know, our how we show up, or how our relationships are. And I wanted to also touch on negotiation, because, you know, we, for one, you know, children need to understand why we're setting the boundaries that we're setting.
Yes. Yes.
And they don't, like you said, they're learning to process emotions, you know, especially like in the early teen years. You know, it depends on how old your kid is, but you know, they're really learning about emotions in general, because like you said, there's 4 emotions or something that they've really like identified as a young child, and now there's all these big things, and like them looking inward, and like, you know, how are they showing up in the world, and comparing themselves to other people and all that kind of stuff. And so really talking about, sorry, I need to set this thing on I need to set it on the, you know, what do you call that, airplane mode, when I'm running these things. Anyway, so yeah, so negotiation, I would just, I highly recommend having a conversation with your kid. If there's a problem with the boundary, you know, it's constantly moving. It was interesting. A friend of ours explained it kind of like a funnel. So like when the child's 2, it's really thin at the bottom, and child's pushing, but not that much. And as they grow, they're always, you know, pushing more. And it's actually what they're supposed to do. Like, you know,
Yes.
we're not creating who we decided that we were going to create. They're creating what they have put together with everything we've given them, plus everything else that they've come in contact with in the world, right?
Right. Because when we're setting boundaries with them when they're young, I mean this respectfully, we are not setting boundaries with someone, with a full human being.
Mm-hmm.
Their brain is very primitive.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as you said, there's very little, it's easier for us as parents. I'm not saying 2-year-olds don't act out, because we all know they do, but it's easier for us as parents to set the boundary with an expectation that they follow through, because their brain is just more simplistic. And that as you get to the top, the reason it's so button pushing for adults is because no one's teaching these relational skills. You are now setting boundaries with another more developing human with less awareness. They're been giving the more full human brain, but they don't have the awareness and how to run it. And so it becomes a giant button pushing experiment. And when we as parents can get past the fact that it's not the same as when they were young, and stop expecting that, like as if somehow it's their fault. So boundaries, let's go into negotiation, but let's talk about, so a boundary comes from a respectful and compassionate place. Number one, for me first, that I respect and have compassion for myself,
Mm-hmm.
and what's right, and that I respect and love the person that I am setting the boundary with. So they are not about controlling, compliance, expectation, shoulding. That's not the point. It's that this is what I need to feel loved and respected. And I, as a teen, I'm going to look at you and go, this is what's going to work for me. I understand that might be hard for you. How can I be in conversation with you about that to help you find a way to process or understand why it's important to me? The reason this is harder for parents is because back when the funnel was really tiny, you and I didn't have to understand why the boundary was important to us. It could just be, well, because I said so.
Mm-hmm. Or
because that's what we did in my family, or because that's always just the way it's been. And as a 3-year-old, they'll take it and go with it. A 14 or 17-year-old, no. they're going to push you every step of the way. But please see that as a gift. What they're pushing is to understand why, because they're trying to process that in their new brain. And it is a good exercise, not a disrespectful exercise for you as the parent to understand, why is that boundary important to you? Is it because it truly is about what works and what doesn't? Is it because you are still expecting them to be compliant and controlled? Is it because that's just the way it was in your family, but you're not really sure if it's important to you? And so teenagers asking these questions are not being disrespectful or talking back. They are speaking up. Now, I'm not saying that that's okay for them to, you know, do it really disrespectfully, but I'm telling you it's going to feel disrespectful. And I'm asking you as a parent, if you're watching this, to hold that in compassion, that they are learning to find their voice. And please know, if there's anyone they want to do it with, it's you, because that's safe. So in asking that, that's where the negotiation comes. I'm not asking you as a parent to let go of all your boundaries and be a free-for-all. Oh, hell no. I am like a mean mom all about boundaries. But the negotiation is this. There is a boundary, and that is your bottom line. Okay, that's your bottom line. Usually just up to the boundary is a bit of a gray area. That's where your teenager is going to want to go straight to. Because if you say, I want the dishes done, I want the dishes washed after dinner, okay? And they say, well, you know, okay, but if I do them, and you're thinking I want them done by 7, and they're thinking, well, as long as they're done by the time you wake up in the morning. So it's clarity. You got to develop clarity. When do you be specific? Set them up to when. When do you want them done by? What does done look like? Does done look like sitting in the drying pan, or does done look like dried and put away? Does done look like you actually used hot water and soap, or you just kind of rinse them under and they're still dirty? Like, you got to tell a teen, what does done look like?
Yes.
And then they can negotiate. Okay, I will do them by 7 o'clock because my friends are online between 8:30 and 9 and I want to be part of that. Or my friends are online between 7 and 9 and right now, that's how I communicate with them. So I'm going to come and do the dishes at 9:30. I don't care, but it is only, as you've said, through conversation that we start to negotiate the boundary. And I hear so many times from parents, they feel that entering into negotiation is their child talking back, and it's not. You are now in relationship with a full human being, not a 3-year-old who will likely be more compliant and they'll do what you ask. So it will require more of you to develop the boundary, be clear about the boundary, and be willing to be in negotiation of the boundary without giving it up.
And the 3-year-old, you know, doesn't have as much, you know, like capability of processing what you're saying, right?
No.
So like, you're not having a conversation necessarily about like, why can't you know, why we need to pick up the toys, or, you know, why we need to not run in the street or whatever, right? But like, as a teenager, they have so much more processing capability, and they want to, and we want to help them find their voice.
Yes.
And it's so hard sometimes, honestly, to stay calm. I've noticed a lot of parents, you know, it's really hard to stay calm, and it's really hard to stay patient. And one of the things that I say is like, yeah, you're not parenting a 2-year-old anymore, but have the patience that you did with a 2-year-old. So like, you know, if you had a 2-year-old sitting in front of you, like, how much would you let them talk? You know, you wouldn't just bite back right away if they started talking, you know. And because there's been patterns developed over years with teenagers, sometimes it's really hard to just sit and just listen. That is the practice, is like, you know, it doesn't even mean that you guys are going to change anything necessarily on the boundary, right? It just means that you're going to allow the child to say what they feel, to say what their position is. Like, oh, you know, my friends are online. Like, this is the only interaction I'm having right now with outside human beings. And, you know, they're going to be on from 7 to 9. Is it okay if maybe I do the dishes at 9:30 or whatever? And then it's like, perfect. But, you know, at 9:30 also, like, you know, you have your homework or whatever. Like, the dialogue can happen, you know, and just really I would highly recommend, just taking a little bit, like almost like silence yourself for a minute and just listen, because then you can see why they even want to negotiate. Like, they probably have a really good idea of why they think that the boundary should be, negotiated.
Yeah, that's a great point, because that's part of the negotiation in the boundary. Is it is a responsibility of everyone in the conversation to be empathetic, which means it is your job to so if you and I are setting a boundary, it's your job as taking ownership of the relationship, which I hope everyone takes ownership of the relationship, not 50-50. I don't want to be in a relationship with anyone who's only in 50%. I want 100-100. For you to be empathetic and ask what you need to understand why the boundary is important to me, just as much as it is for me to be empathetic, to ask and really find out, why is that boundary important to you?
Right.
Because when I hold that, I may not shift my boundary, and you and I may decide, you know what, this isn't such an important boundary. We're going to need external help to really settle this. But when I come from a place of empathy, then I am more willing to find ideas in that gray area I might not have seen before, because I understand what's important to you, and I'm trying to honor that, just as you are understanding why this boundary is important to me, and honor that. And so, yeah, it takes a conversation. And when we can quiet ourselves enough to listen to our teens, as they are, remember, processing complex emotional, intellectual patterns that they had not had before, they're not going to get it right. It's going to be messy. And that's a big part of just the listening.
Yeah. And it was like you said before, I think last time we went live which was that, we've been through like a lot of things in our lives as adults. And remember that this is their first time, experiencing most things, and so it takes a lot of patience. And also, I would say, it's such an unsure time right now. And, it's okay to talk to the kids about those big things, and also let them know, like, we're going to figure it out. I feel like that's really important, is like, I got you, and we're going to figure it out. Because I think, when we have fear, kids sense it. Everybody senses, right? And so then there's this feeling of like, being unsure. And I think that if the more we talk about things, the less unsure we're going to become about it. Like, this is, and also I really like, sharing with them how, how I'm processing, why I have these boundaries. Like, the only way they're going to learn is if we what do you call it? We just
model it.
Model. Thank you. I was looking for that word. Yes. Modeling behavior. We really need to model, and then that's how they're going to learn, because, they don't know how to say. And also, like, really being open and like, calm or just quiet. It doesn't even have to, your insides can be jumping. Learning how to calm the insides is really helpful. And it's okay to be like hot. You know what I mean? And just listen and just let the conversation, try not to like judge what they're saying. Just try to understand, what it is they're saying, and help them try to express that too. Because, are you saying X? That's okay to say too. Like, I hear you saying such and such. That's actually really a good strategy in motivational interviewing. It's used a lot, which with therapists and stuff, which is, repeating back to the person, I'm hearing you say this. I'm hearing you say that this is the challenge, or, and also pointing out ambiguity. So I'm hearing you say that you really love your friends, and they're doing some weird stuff right now that is, concerning you.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that clarity is what is the hard part, and where our egos get in the way, because that's where we feel challenged, that our teen is asking us for the clarity, and it's like, well, who do you, and we can, it's okay, we get backed up. And but like you said, they don't have the clarity either. So when we originally come to the agreement, or come to the boundary, and we come up against the boundary, all we're talking about is the dishes and the dishes getting done. It's not about the dishes, not about the dishes getting done. It's not about that. So don't make it about that. It's about me as a parent, say, feeling respected, feeling like I'm not a maid or a servant, and that then I feel devalued. And so my boundary about having the dishes washed are about, I hold that boundary for myself so that I raise my value and I make sure that I don't feel less than. I'm like, no, I already worked today, and I bought the food, and I planned the meal, and I cooked the meal. And even if your teen helped you make the meal, that, you know, no, I hold us as equal, okay, like as capable, age appropriate adults in this house, and that therefore, so it's about me feeling respected. So if I make it about the dishes, and the conversation will not go well, and it won't end up in the place that it can. And to your point of modeling, that's a wonderful process to do in front of your teen. And they say, well, Mom, why is it so important that you have the dishes done by 6 o'clock? And I'll be like, I don't know, because I had to do them by 6 o'clock in my house. Yeah, I guess I never thought about that. Okay, so when do I want them done? It's okay to do that kind of processing in front of your teenager, as you said, to model permission for them to process. Now, they might not be an external processor, they might be an internal processor, which will feel like a lot more silence. It's not that they're not participating. That's not it. It's that they're internally processing, but you're giving them permission to sort through that new quagmire of feelings and thoughts they're having to what really is important. And washing the dishes may not be important to them, but your relationship with them might be important. And when they feel like you honor and respect their relationship with their friends, so you want them to be online when their friends are online, as long as it's in a way that is appropriate, then they are more willing to come to the table and go, oh, I don't want to wash the dishes, but I know it's important to you. And yeah, you did cook dinner and all of that stuff. So you're right. Modeling the processing is super important, because it helps them let go of, it's not about the issue. It's not about the thing, the behavior. It never was. So, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I really like that. And I like, you know, I was going to bring up a point, but I think I might have fled.
It'll come back.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll come back.
But you know, the thing about the dishes, you know, and like, maybe it's because I go into the kitchen and I'm like, you know, I'm going to start doing the dishes if, you know, they're not done. Or maybe it's because I don't like looking at them not being done, and it makes me upset, and I don't want to be upset. So that's the reason why. Like, and maybe, you know, in my house, dishes, you know, I sometimes do the dishes, but it's all like preset, because we talk about it. We have a conversation, like, what's your schedule like? What's, you know, what's happening, and, you know, who can do it? And that's completely fine. Like, sometimes somebody else cooks. And so I just think that, sitting down to schedule might be a really good idea, to like, so that this is part of the boundaries, so that you don't have the problem right when it comes up. You know, like I've seen, like, you know, Ali and I are both on TikTok, and there's some parents that are on there, and they, you know, there was Bill,
yeah, Billy Bosco.
Yeah. And he had a video one time about the kid taking out the trash. Right. And so he wanted the kid to take the trash out right now, you know, and, you know, but the kid's playing a video game that can't pause or whatever. Like, is it because, like, I can't throw something away in the trash can right now? Or, you know, but the thing is like, if we can plan, like, okay, I'm going to need you to have the trash taken out by X time or whatever. And trash kind of fills up, you know, different times. But like, I'm going to need you to have the dishes done. The more we can schedule, and the more we can bring our kids in on scheduling, the more buy-in they're going to get. Buy-in, that's what we need.
Absolutely. Well, and then they don't feel taken off guard, because their world is sort of like a cone, right? And getting in I call it the bubble of folk. Like, you're not going to get in there And they feel really disrespected when we run in on them. And let's say they're playing a video game with their friends at Camp Pause, and we're like, you gotta go get the garbages out. The garbage man got us in half an hour. And they're like, well, geez Louise, like, come on. We don't like it when people do that to us. We actually have a schedule on our fridge.
Yep.
Because we were trying to do the, well, when someone does them, and it wasn't working. So given this pandemic, and so all school sports are off for us. So we used to have to work around school sports. Now for the last, unfortunately, 9 months, we don't have to. We have a schedule on our fridge. There's 4 of us in my house. We each cook 1 night a week, and we make a little bit extra. So there's a 1 do your own thing night, and the other 2 nights are leftovers. Yep. And then we have who's doing dishes on what's nights. And it means that 3 nights out of 7, there's nobody doing the dishes. Do they pile up? Yep, they pile up. So usually, like you said, one of us will step in, and they are, my kids, my teenagers are so much more aware of when someone else chose to do something, and they're like, oh, thanks for doing dishes tonight. And I was like, it's like, dude, I was standing here, it was fine, nobody's on dishes, I chose to do that. And they're like, oh, well, thanks. And then with the garbages and that kind of stuff, we have it written on the calendar. And now that they're older, we actually got them to put the reminder in their phones. Reminders in their phones, not the day of. That does not work for a teenager. Put it the day before. Yeah. Because then they get their garbages out and into the kitchen or on time. And then there's no, and do they forget some days? Of course they forget some days. They're human. But then there's no, where they feel disrespected because now I have an emergency on their time. I don't like it when they have an emergency on my time. Like, prepare, my son. So it is about the conversations to say, okay, well, this is what it takes. And right now, I know you and I are using like household stuff, but that's pretty common. To prepare through conversation, what kind of things does this house require to run? And negotiate who's going to do what at an age appropriate level. My 19-year-old now, if I cannot get grocery shopping, trying to set up, my new business and the programs I'm running and everything is taking everything. I'll give him the grocery list. And he's like, sure. He actually finds it kind of empowering to like go to the grocery store, and he knows where most things are, but I'll get 5 calls. But I'd rather get 5 calls because he's learning it himself. Yeah. And he feels more confident in doing it. So it's really important.
That buy-in is super, super helpful. I feel like, we are a family, we're a team, we're all doing this together. Like, let's sit down, figure out what works for you. These are the things that I need, these are the things that I'm doing. Maybe they aren't even aware of everything that you're doing as a grown-up, right? Because and actually that could even be a conversation point for you to share, like bills and share all the things you're managing, because they're going to be managing it eventually, right? And sometimes, we just get caught so much doing the things, and they don't learn in school, how to balance checkbook and do all these things. So bringing up those things and like, these are all the things I have, these are all the things you have, like, let's work together to make a schedule that's loose also and allows for flexibility. I'm not saying that this is going to be the 100% and this is going to, like, my way rules every single time, but like, yeah, we're going to set this and we're going to go by it, and then we can negotiate as we go, because we have mutual respect and then consistency. Which is challenging sometimes for parents, because it does take effort for parents to be consistent. It's tiring sometimes, like you said, it doesn't happen every time. Like, he's 19 and he maybe doesn't even take the trash down. I have an 18-year-old, she doesn't always do the things, and she is starting to get really good at, like, knowing her expectations and things. But, it's still like, that we need to be consistent with what the boundaries are,
and let's go there to talk about consequences. But I just wanted to say first, the one thing that I think that works about boundaries over time, if parents are willing to play this boundary game, it works because of brain psychology and brain physiology. Because what boundaries do is they inherently increase respect in the relationship. And relationships where I feel respected are relationships I'm more likely to spend more time in, and want to participate in. Boundaries also increase compassion and empathy. So I feel like how I feel matters to you, and how you feel matters to me. And I want to work with that, not plow through it. So that is why boundaries work to connect parents and teens, even though it takes effort, because the opposite of expecting, doing ultimatums, threats, expectations, control, compliance, that disconnects, and it becomes epic. It becomes like World War III. So let's talk about that, though, is the effort it takes to hold a boundary. It takes energy, right? We're not going to kid anybody here. It takes energy.
Yes.
And being consistent with those takes more energy. And I have so many parents say to me, oh, it's so tiring. And I say, yes. And what's the alternative? Right? Because this level of tiring will decrease. But the level of tiring you're telling me you want instead is the World War III epicness, which grows in energy required, emotional and otherwise, and has dramatically more impact and fallout than the amount of energy it takes to hold a boundary. So let's just be honest with ourselves. It does take energy, but this amount of energy is decreasing over time, and not doing it will increase over time. So withholding a boundary, you and I aren't necessarily talking about like withholding the boundary about taking out the trash and now they get grounded and disciplined. Like, we're not talking about that. However, when teenagers don't comply, I hate that word because that's not what I'm looking for. When they don't play the boundary game, let's look at it that. When they don't play into the boundary, the number one behavior modifier is when people understand at a feeling level the impact of their actions.
Yep.
Right now, I am not saying go play the big heavy on your teen. For heaven, please don't do that. But let's face it, as a teen, what felt the worst was disappointing your parents in some version. So do not do this manipulatively. Do not do this for them. But when you say to them, I know you forgot to take out the garbage this morning. I know, nobody's perfect. Here's the thing, is when it gets left out there, then like the raw meat stuff that was in there, whatever, it starts to really smell. And in some areas, we're actually having a massive rodent issue, massive. And so it becomes a place like, now I got to put that somewhere so critters don't get at it. And it is like another task on my list to now manage the fact that the garbage didn't get taken out. So, and they're like, oh yeah. And nowhere in there did I say, you're a schmuck, you're stupid, you're inconsiderate, you didn't, no.
Right.
Just look, here's the impact of what happened. So let's say it's something a little bit more serious now, like they didn't meet curfew, or, they went drinking, underage drinking, and that you've made it clear that's not a thing in your house or whatever. Same thing. You have the sit down, like you and I were talking about. You have the sit down, and exactly as you said, inside, I'm like, outside, and we're breathing, and we're breathing. Because for your teenager to hear how you're feeling, and for you to hear them, requires you to be at a certain level of calm, which means if they've stepped over a boundary, you might need to take a day or two.
Yes.
Do not do it in the moment.
100%.
Because if you,
thank you for saying that, because
yes.
So important. Sometimes we don't need to have the conversation right now.
No, because if you're in reaction, which your whole thing about the theta, right? You are way out of theta, which means you don't have access to what most needs to be said because you're in reaction. You're in a version of fight or flight. And I guarantee you and your teenager are going to say things that you're not going to want to have said. So step back, step away if you need to get back into what would be a theta. Do some deep breathing before you go sit with your teen and find that place of compassion again. Yeah, you can be hurt and upset, and find that place of compassion so that when you go and talk to them. Now, again, you got to let them know, look, you came home drunk. We had an agreement at, let's say they're 16, I don't know. And let's say underage drinking is not a thing in your house. And you go, we've had a lot of discussions about this. And so I'm feeling hurt. I'm feeling disrespected. all of my worry as a parent, like what could have happened to you
Right.
when
Right.
you were in that state is going on. And I'm like a little jacked up, like help me to understand. Tell me what was going on for you. And then shut up and listen. Listen. It could have been that they thought, oh, I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't do this. And then found themselves in that place that we all find ourselves in, of peer pressure. And so you can honor in that moment, wow, I love that you had that thought. I love that you were thinking I shouldn't be doing this. I'm so proud of you for having that thought. And then you can talk to them about peer pressure. And yeah, because I'll tell you what, the pressure as a teenager to comply with their peers is so much higher than as an remember or can sometimes understand, because anonymity, which means being different, like autonomous, to be different as a teenager, is social suicide. It is social suicide. I'm not saying it's right for them to do everything their friends are doing.
Right.
But please remember that. When you tell them how you felt about it, you listen to how they felt about it. Now you're back in a conversation about, okay, so you did break a boundary, and let's talk about the consequence. The number one thing with teenagers is let them help decide the consequence. Invite them in, because often they'll be like, yeah. And you say, okay, so what do you think is appropriate? And they'll be like, well, you probably wouldn't want me to be with those friends. Or I'm like, yep, that'd be one thing. You know, you've got to let them, they often will tell you a consequence that is far more impactful for them than what you would have come up with, right?
Yep.
And then follow through with it. When you follow through with it, big thing, love them through it. Do not continue to remind them of their transgression. That's shaming. If they're like bored and they missed out, say they missed out on another friend thing, and you'd be like, yeah, dude, I know this is hard. This is hard and you're doing great with it. This is hard and you're doing great. I'm proud of you for walking out this consequence. You're doing great. Love them through the consequence. Don't keep saying, well, if you wouldn't have done this, then you wouldn't.
Right.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah.
No. You will disconnect your relationship instantly. So love them through it. Then you don't bring it up again. Studies are also showing, I just want to throw this in about grounding, that when you do grounding and it's more than a week, it is actually having negative mental health impact and increasing experiences of isolation, anxiety, depression, anger, and rage. So I'm not saying your child might not require some longer term consequences, but if they're going to be longer term, just be cautious of what those are from a mental health perspective. It's more important that they understand the impact of the behavior and why you hold the boundary than it is about holding their head in a vice for the next 90 days because you're pissed.
Yep. 100%. I think, you know, I remember one time, I don't even remember what my daughter did. I just remember it was something I was disappointed about. You know, she came to me and she said, Mom, I did X. And I was like, okay, so, you know, what do you think your punishment should be? Like, her internal stuff was already so bad. I didn't really even need to do anything.
Exactly.
You know, it was like she had a punishment that I was way worse than I would have even given. But the thing that she was doing to herself inside was even worse. And I think that talking about feelings and talking about being nice to ourselves, and just to wrap it right back around to, you know, what I'm, you know, trying to help people with is to find that, you know, internal peace, to help yourself talk nicer to yourself and teach your kids this stuff too. Because, you know, this internal dialogue that we have with ourselves is, we're teaching it to our kids too. And if we're not teaching our kids to stop, you know, beating themselves up inside, then we're basically teaching them to keep doing it. And so I think that, you know, identifying, like, you know, you're not a bad person. You're not, you know, these actions are just actions, and like, we can work through them and you can change, and they don't define you. And it doesn't mean that you're like in this kind of group, or you're this kind of person, you're in this box or whatever. You're not in a box. And, you know, and make in decision making and growth and all that. It's a lifelong process, right? And so it's like every moment you're making a decision. And so, you know, helping them through those decisions and like, why did you make that decision? And how could I help you maybe make a different decision that's more true to you and what you want out of your life?
That's so good. That is so good, because it comes right back to boundaries are about respect and compassion. So when your daughter comes to you, you're not like all shame on her about what she did. You can have compassion for being less than perfect, because we all are.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have compassion for her about how hard she was being on herself,
Mm-hmm.
and that maybe you didn't even choose the consequence she chose. You lessened it a little because she was being, so you're teaching self-love even when we mess up. And you're teaching this beautiful thing of self-respect, because you are separating the person from the behavior.
Yes.
Not because we are not responsible for our behavior, because we are, but we are not our behavior. So I love you, but I did not like that behavior, right? You can be in that,
Yeah.
and they know they are unconditionally loved. And that doesn't mean you're going to love every choice they make.
That's right.
But you love them. And so I love the way you said that we have to separate them and be compassionate with them in their transgressions or messiness, because they will have it. And it's a giant lesson for us as adults, as a parent, to be compassionate with ourselves when we mess up as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Huge opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And then teaching them to take accountability. Like if we share our you know, shortcomings with them, you know, as modeling, then we can sorry, the kids are walking through here. And then we can, you know, teach them how to process. That is way too loud. Excuse me, whoever has that sound on, can you please turn it off? I don't know. That's okay.
It's life happening.
I've got 3 of them home right now, 3 of the 4, and so you know, busy house.
It's real life. It's happening right now.
I think maybe we're towards the end here, maybe, because
yeah,
turn it off, baby. I'm on a live. Thank you.
It's I think, to go back to the consequence part, is there's a lot of parents that will get to the point of setting the boundary, and they're good with that.
Mm-hmm.
They're afraid to create the consequence and afraid to carry through with it, because they're afraid their child won't love them in the consequence. Like, well, what if they don't like me? Okay, right. Well, part of that is, I can tell you they're not going to love you. Mm-hmm. But because it's the way you come at the consequence. When you come at the consequence with compassion and yet resolve, they're not feeling hated because you have separated them from the behavior, and yet you're holding them responsible for that behavior, right? And so a boundary is not a boundary without a consequence. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to say that right now. You're pretending. You are pretending. A boundary is not a boundary unless it has a consequence. And none of it needs to feel like trashing, dog talking, like shaming, disrespecting. I mean, someone breaking a boundary can feel disrespectful, but it can all happen within a conversation. And your point about like being in that place of response and breathing and taking some space, it is okay as a parent to have some strong feelings about what happened. Mm-hmm. It's how you communicate those. And you might be in tears, and and that's okay, as long as it's not projecting all that feeling on your teen. Mm-hmm. And they're going to feel uncomfortable, and that's a great behavior modifier when they sit and feel uncomfortable. Yes, mm-hmm. It is.
Yes,
it totally is. So hey, listen, how much your 30-day Theta challenge is going on to the end of December?
Yeah, I'm actually going to start running it again at the beginning of January. So, but you can start anytime. It's 30 days of basically just holding a space at nighttime before you go to bed, and as you wake up in the morning, to kind of like organize your thoughts, whatever that looks like for you, you know. And I have written a journal that's like help to identify some of your thoughts and stuff. So you can use the journal or not use the journal, but the challenge is to hold a space for theta, because when we're about to go to bed at night, we're heading into theta. When we're waking up in the morning, we're coming out of theta. And theta is actually a time when we organize our thoughts, and we're able to like the subconscious and the conscious mind, we're learning. It's and when kids are in theta, when they're really little, it's how they're programming. So it's actually kind of like where we program is when we're in theta. So like we gather a lot of information when the brain's moving really quickly, but as the brain slows down, it organizes the information. And so you know, for healing, for self-healing, it's like a call to action to like do some self-healing at night before you go to bed. Put the phone away from your body. Encourage your teenagers to put their phones away from their body. Listen to something that's like positive or inspiring at nighttime, not rap music, because I love rap too. You know what I mean? I like rap and I like hip hop, and you know, I'm funky fresh, you know, but also like, you know, we have this connection with our devices that is slightly unhealthy. I mean, the devices are not that healthy for us. Let's just be honest about it. And they emit ions and things like that are real, and we do need to like disconnect, you know, not have that blue screen in our face like right before we go to bed. So I've been talking to parents that are doing this too. Having the phone, and they're like, I have a problem and I can't put the phone down right before bed at night, you know. And I'm like, you know, remember that this organization thing is happening at nighttime for your brain, and that it really does need a little bit of time to calm down, you know, to relax and organize. And so the 30-day theta challenge is also like adding some healing into that. Like there's tones and things that resonate with our cells. All the cells in our body are alive. They resonate. They have, you know, these are actually scientific stuff, because I'm a nurse. So I like Eastern medicine, and I also like Western medicine. And I think the fusion between the two of them is important. You know, there's a place for everything. And so, like I said, these brainwaves are like things that have been measured. This is things that are being studied. There's psychologists that are trying to get people into alpha and theta for healing, for depression and anxiety and things like that. I mean, like, you know, like these are like groundbreaking things that people are doing to get, and we get there into alpha and theta right before we go to bed, like I said, and right as we're waking up in the morning. And if we can take that time for healing, so just 30 days for, you know, 10 to 20 minutes at night, just listening to something that's healing and soothing for your body, for you. I'm giving suggestions as well. And and then there's an assessment, so you can assess like, how are you doing with XYZ, right? Like, how are you doing with your inner peace, like being able to control your actions, and how are you reacting, so that you can just like, you know, it's the 10 questions, really easy. I made it interactive with my son. There's a Google Drive you get access to, and yeah, you can join anytime. I have like this MailChimp thing. I'm learning all these things, right? Like, you know, I'm so new at this stuff. But MailChimp allows me to, so that if you sign up for it, it's like a little form. It's like your name and your age or whatever. And then you get in your mailbox the access to the drive. And then on the second day, you'll get another email from me like, hey, you know, and you can unsubscribe on there too if you don't want to get more emails, if you're like, yeah, this is not for me. Also, then on the 14th day, you'll get it again, like, hey, it's a check-in, like, how are things going? Are you still doing the 30 days? And then you'll get another one on the 29th day, so that you can take the last assessment and hopefully your inner peace score increased. So I just really would like encourage anyone, and not even if you don't sign up for 30-day theta, to start doing some of the internal work, like journaling. And just when you journal, you can just say whatever the heck is coming to your mind, and also taking a break from the phone in the morning and at night, and just taking some time for, like, you know, brain organization.
Yeah. So if people, I know you're sharing a lot of the 30-day challenge stuff on want to sign up, that form, they go to your link in your profile, right? And they can sign up. Yeah. So especially if you're starting it again in January, they can get there, right?
Yeah. If you go to my link in my profile, you're gonna. Yeah, I'll be running it all the way through January. So don't worry, you have time,
Awesome.
plenty of time. If right now is not the time, like a lot of people are having Christmas and holidays and family, and it's just too chaotic. I wanted to offer it before the end of the year because I feel like it's just been such a hard year, and we really like could use some gentleness on ourselves and like some healing, and these are
Yeah.
like real things. Like, don't go against religion, it's just like holding a space for your mind to like slow down and to be nicer to yourself. And I just really would implore everyone to like think about how you're treating yourself, regardless if you join my 30-day Theta or not. Like I said, it'll be available. All you got to do is go to the link in my bio. You can sign up and you can start anytime. And then you can watch the 30-day Theta IG series that I have going on. And and I'll be showing up, on my IG, and I'm developing it too. So as it goes, I have like screensaver. I'm offering all kinds of free things because I love being creative, and it's just so luckily for you guys, I'm giving it all away for free because I don't, I've decided also for this new year is like I am abundant, and I have plenty right now, and I just want to give it. That's why I really just want to help people heal. I'm not trying to like sell you anything. I just really just want to help people heal, and I'm having fun doing it. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
That's awesome. And if you go to the link in my bio, I've got a free 5-day challenge for a better relationship with your teen, because as you said, this has been a very stressful time, and sometimes the holidays can be even more stressful. So it's 5 days in a row of step-by-step, really specific instructions and tools, downloads for you to use as a parent to start shifting that culture, that relationship that you have with your teenager. Because as you said, we're both in this because we believe so wholeheartedly in people, and we know that more positivity, more calm, more love is possible. Yeah. So those are just a couple ways we're doing them. So thank you so much for doing this with me today.
Allie, you're always a pleasure.
So awesome. I will
you,
see you on TikTok and Instagram. And we'll talk soon.
We'll do it again.
Happy holidays.
Yeah. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.